The First Amendment
Did you know that you have rights? The Constitution says you do.
lives here. Watch and listen at thedailymojo.com.
Adam, you wrote these books. The Max learns about the Constitution. Danny learns about the Declaration to make sure that the kids, the youths of America, the future leaders actually understand what the country is about, right?
Yes, that is correct. And, one thing that I've learned is that you got to get to the youth. You have to get to the kids and you have to make it interesting for them. You can't just teach names and dates because that's boring. You have to tell a story. You have to entertain. And, getting back to the press secretary, there's just such a lack of self-awareness. And it's sad. But
it's beyond. She's dumber than a box of hair. She really is. She's just not a smart human being. And they've said this, the whole reason that they hired her, appointed her, whatever, is that she is a black immigrant lesbian. I mean, why not hire a cross-eyed left-handed person?
We've ceased to become a country of where you have to prove yourself,
right,
to get a job, to hold a job, to advance. And you're just advanced. You get a job because of who you are on the outside. Am I a man? Am I a woman? Are you gay? What religion are you? What color is your skin? That's 180 degrees what the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King spoke about on August 28th of 63 at the I Have a Dream speech at the base of the Lincoln Memorial.
It's sad, and that's just it. And that's why I was saying, I'm trying to do everything with a smile now, because otherwise, if you just look at what's happening out there, it's depressing as hell.
Do you think the American people are buying this? Do you think the American people buy this? The average person?
No, I don't. I don't think they do. And the reason I say that is when we did our Route 66 road trip, when we saw you, we talked to a lot of people on the road in rural America, along Route 66. And not one of them was a Biden supporter. It was, they were the common folk out there. So no, I don't think a lot of people are buying into this crap.
It's interesting. I have a number of Polish friends, and one of my Polish friends, she grew up under communism, and she said the people knew. She speaks about this. The people know, and they actively laughed at the government. So dogs. I don't know if you hear the dogs downstairs, but in any event, I think people are actively laughing at these people. But then, what do? How do you get beyond it?
Yeah, how do you fight it? That's the worst, or the biggest question. And we saw what happened January 6th. We saw what the media turned it into. We saw what they've done to people who were there. And then again, I feel like I have to use the disclaimer: the people who broke windows or hurt people, they should be prosecuted. But the vast majority of the crimes were trespassing.
So what they do,
even though the door was held open,
point out the exception. They point out the exception, not the rule.
Right.
And so you ultimately have to get beyond that. But getting back to the book,
yes,
Danny learns about the Declaration of Independence.
Yep.
I wrote these. When my kids, and I told the story last time, but I think it bears repeating. When my kids, I raised 4 children. My oldest is an ER nurse. My daughter is a paramedic in Arizona, and then we have twin boys. One's doing his internship at the University of Chicago in internal medicine. He's a doctor, and his twin brother is a mechanical engineer. Actually, he's in Dallas. But I would not. You put the kids in the room, and you hear you just want some peace and quiet for a little bit. And they have nothing to do. Now, this is clearly before the time of iPads, which I don't know if that's such a great idea to get in a room with an iPad. And what do you teach them? Where are you going with that? But
Right.
I used to put the kids in the room with a copy of the Gettysburg Address or the preamble to the Constitution. And I said, when you memorize, and I did it age appropriate, you can come out of your room. So they were actively doing something that actually paid off in 7th grade when they got extra credit for being able to recite the Gettysburg Address from memory. But I made it interesting. And, one of my sons, I put him in his room with the preamble to the Constitution. And I said, when you learn this, you can come out. And I leave the room and he's following me. And I said, well, where the hell are you going? He said, oh, Dad, I know this. And so I said, okay. He sang it from the Schoolhouse Rock videos. If you remember the Schoolhouse Rock Saturday morning cartoons.
Absolutely.
So it was interesting. The Schoolhouse Rock videos made learning interesting. I wrote this in the style. I wrote the narrative to this. I had help with all the artwork and obviously all the formatting, but in the style of Dr. Seuss. There's a lot of rhyming that goes on. There's a lot of alliteration, and I think the feedback I've gotten, it's interesting. So you have to start instilling those foundational principles of our founding documents, and go from there. So
and that's the thing. It's not complicated. It's the solution is to educate the future citizens of the United States, which is why schools are so intent on teaching them about gender and how they identify and pronouns and pride parades and all that other crap, because the left has been able to.
How confusing is that for a kid? It is. It's incredibly confusing. But here I have a friend, acquaintance. I'd say a friend. It tells a story of John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, how they were bitter adversaries during their political career. But about 1815, they started as elder statesmen. They started to reconcile, and they started this letter correspondence between Monticello and Braintree, Massachusetts. And I think the letter was written in like 1821 or 1822. And I'm paraphrasing the way my friend tells the story. And that's that Jefferson writes to Adams and says, ultimately the American people are going to screw this up, generally speaking. And Adams writes back, he says, yes, they will. But we left them a roadmap, being the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. And they're not complicated documents.
No.
And that ultimately is going to go back to where we need to go. But the people in power, the media, have so obliterated the true meaning. They've tried to extract a different meaning from the words that were written. Doc talked about. I learned a lot from Doc.
Me too.
In one of his videos that he did, they have the Second Amendment, and the people are trying today to find different meaning, but the founders left us reams and reams of papers meaning what their intent was. We don't have to go back and what did as like when you're reading the Bible, they have the gleanings, where the sages try to interpret what the rabbi meant. Well, we don't have to go do that. We have the writings. We have the papers. What did they mean when they wrote the Second Amendment? Why did they write the Second Amendment? We don't have to guess. And those documents, those papers, those original documents need to just be brought out and taught. Copies of the original documents, as opposed to having some Ivy League professor tell us how they've dispensed with the scholarly notion of footnoting and documents and referencing. You know what I'm talking about. You know which book I'm talking about.
Yes. Do you have Big Ben there in your in the house? What?
That's the grandfather clock.
Okay. Oh, gotcha. You're in the smoking room. You're in the library. Well, and it doesn't help that we have a president. We have a president who gets out there and says stupid stuff about the Second Amendment, outright lies about the
He
Second
doesn't
Amendment.
know
You know,
what
you
he's
couldn't own a
saying.
cannon. He has no idea, but yet millions of people hear him, and there are enough stupid people or ignorant people that believe every word he says. And oh, you couldn't own a cannon when you could own a cannon in the day.
Yes. As a
It's
matter of
just,
fact, you
they've
had they
watered
talk
down everything.
they talk about the Second Amendment. Well, it just meant muskets. No, no, it
Right.
didn't. Well, they couldn't have foreseen capacity magazines. No, we had the pepper box pistol, which could fire off 20 rounds in like 5 seconds. You had the
Right.
Ghirardelli air rifle, which could
As opposed to
accurately,
Ghirardelli chocolate.
yes, as opposed to Ghirardelli, the
Right.
Ghirardelli air rifle. I can't even pronounce it. Hey, you look at. I haven't had my coffee yet. What do you want?
Yeah, but you're right. If we taught kids
You
this
already had
stuff,
these firearms in existence.
right, we'd have a fighting chance, literally a fighting chance, if we taught kids this information from a young age instead of the crap that they're teaching. We all know that. The bottom line is that the new book that you wrote is a tool so that people wanting to know what they can do to be a part of the solution. You know, because I think a lot of people feel frustrated. You can't go to Washington protest; they'll put you under the jail. You can't come out and criticize the administration. You know, they'll arrest you. But you can teach your kids and your grandkids about the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence. And you can get this book right now. Danny learns about the Declaration of Independence at Amazon. You can also get Max learns about the Constitution. Read them to your kids, your grandkids. Buy a bunch of them for the elementary school, your local elementary. You know, find a way to get the information out there. And I'll put a link up. I'll tweet that out. I want to talk. A lot of people in the audience know Gwen. You're beautiful and talented. You're truly your better half. And we know that she's been facing some health challenges in the past few years. And we didn't get to see her when we were up there. And boy, that's a whole story. But just give us an update on Gwen. How is she? What's the latest?
She's done better. Well, you know, I don't want to get too deep in the weeds, but there will be a time where we can do that and we can tell some Gwen stories. And you know, we've had an entertaining time over the past 36 years, raising 4 children. But she decided there really are no more treatments. So she's foregone
Right.
any more chemo, any more treatments. We're at the stage where she has palliative care now, where we're just managing pain. And, you know, pretty much the cancer, what's really interesting is the cancer's destroyed her GI tract. But, you know, when they pull labs from her, all her organs are functioning relatively well: liver, kidney, heart,
Right.
lung. Although she was in the hospital recently with pneumonia. But yeah,
She
it's
back at the house? She back at the house right
she
now?
is back at the house. She's resting a lot, and
She is tough.
well,
And I want, if you can, just the elevator story about when the last time she was in the COVID thing, because people don't
oh,
think that the COVID is still. But
no, this is
can you?
absolutely 100% true. 100% true. So these dogs are driving me nuts. They're driving me batshit crazy. I don't know how hopefully you can't hear, but in any event, so we're down at the University of Chicago, and I will mention the University of Chicago because the patient care at the University of Chicago is crap. World-renowned research, but it is absolutely awful, and the policies change from day to day. And you know, someone needed to come and have a conversation with Gwen about, you know, the reality of where we were after she had this GI they went down her, looked into her stomach with a scope to see what they saw in the GI
Right.
tract. And so her brother, who's an RN, flew in, and our son, who's a physician, drove down to the University of Chicago because he was up north at the time, and they wanted to have a talk with his twin sister and her son. And all of a sudden, on that particular day, the COVID restrictions changed. They wouldn't let her see her brother, who flew in from out of town. They wouldn't let her see her son, who's a physician. And there was, at that time, they decided, and I wasn't allowed to, I had to leave the room. So I said, okay, that's fine. Well, I'll leave. Why don't you let the boys come up and have a conversation with her? And she just absolutely lost it. Now, this is a woman she's got lines coming out of her, and she started throwing F-bombs, and they didn't care. They've lost their humanity at the University of Chicago on the oncology floor. That's the 10th floor. I have no problem with this. This is absolutely 100%. You hear about these stories in the paper or whatever, and you think, come on, that's conspiratorial. No, not. They called security.
Yeah. God.
Then when they called security, they called the police. And then they didn't want me to leave. They wanted me to leave, then they didn't want me to leave. I'm going to leave. You can have our son come up and her brother come. No. The left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing. Now,
Right.
Again, I will say world-renowned research, patient care is awful.
Because they get money. They get money from the government for these grants.
I'm going to tell you, they were looking for a COVID death. I'm absolutely convinced. My son was convinced. They delayed her GI procedure. And we brought in our own antigen tests, and she tested negative. I mean, she was completely asymptomatic. She had, but they kept on running.
Am I correct in saying that they would not, or one of the reasons they gave for not giving her the procedure was because they, quote, feared for the surgeon's safety because of COVID?
Yes, 100%. 100%. Now you're talking, she goes into this room, the airflow changes every minute. They're all wearing PPE. That's what these people signed up for when they decided to become physicians. Yet they were concerned for the health and welfare of the doctors performing the procedure and an anesthesiologist performing the procedure. It was non sequitur. It was insane. And I'll tell you, we didn't think she would. She's doing better now. I mean, as far as her, she's feeling a little better, but we did not think she was going to make it out of the hospital. That's how bad it was. That they withheld care. She's being fed through a port in her chest. It's called TPN. Right. And they withheld that from her for 9 days. 9 days. She went specifically like 8 3/4 days. She had no nutrition. Because
these people are monsters.
It takes time. It takes 1 day to mix this TPN. It's a protocol. There's a computer program. They run labs. They know what to put in the food, the TPN, the nutrition. It was absolutely criminal what we went through, and I experienced it. Gwen experienced it firsthand. So what she ended up doing, and I'm telling you, we did not think she was going to make it out of the hospital. When they started to pull that, and they would not let her see her brother, she pulled the lines out of herself. She disconnected herself, and she does have some medical training because we give her fluids and everything here at the house.
Right.
It wouldn't even walk her down or push her in a wheelchair down the elevator. She walked out. She grabbed a wheelchair outside her door, and she walked herself to the elevator, took herself down the elevator where her brother and our son were waiting for her, and drove her home. At which point we gave her fluids and gave her. It was absolutely criminal what they did there. It's 100%. 100%.
I know you're telling the truth, and it's just so mind blowing.
My tone and tenor get a little bit abrasive when I start reliving this and telling the story.
As they should. It's
hard even for me to wrap my mind around what was actually happening to us in the hospital at the University of Chicago. Yeah. Now I'll tell you, I get it. On the north side, she's getting great, real good patient care when she was in for pneumonia. Good communication. It's all about continuity of care. And at the University of Chicago, each team, the palliative doesn't talk to the oncology team, who doesn't talk to the GI team, and the hospitalist isn't reading they've lost their humanity. They're just doing
Yes.
their research, and they're kept
Absolutely.
on because of the money they bring in from the NIH and their grant money, their research money.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's stunning that we've gotten to this point. All right, 30 seconds left. Final thoughts. Obviously, need people to go out and buy the book. And I still want you to consider doing Adam's rants, because it's cathartic.
Well,
You're very smart. You're attractive. You're just a good looking man. Is that enough, Ron? Did I butter him up enough?
Hey, I was just thinking that myself, actually.
Okay, just make sure.
What do you mean
No,
not smart? Not
you-
like I'm gonna have it. You want
You're
to
wicked
start around
smart. You're wicked smart. But really, I appreciate the fact that you're being a part of the solution, because truly, if you're not a part of the solution, you're a part of the problem, which is the whole reason we do this show. I mean, it's certainly not for the money.
I got mocked. I got mocked a few days ago. But in this room,
Do we need to kill somebody?
no, in this room where I am right now, I am the smartest guy in this room right now.
Yes, I cannot argue with that. Can't argue with that. All right, buddy.
Okay.
Tell Gwen that I love her, that we love her, and love you too. And if you need anything, let us know. We're here for you.
Thanks, boys.